Hi, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice, and today I'm taking a look at this game, The Coldest Night. It's a relatively simple cooperative card game for 1 to 4 players. It has an interesting theme, though. Basically, you are stranded in an isolated cabin in the dead of winter. You're burning whatever you can find to try and keep the fire going and make it through the night. I'm going to show you how the game works, and then we'll come back here and I'll give you my thoughts on it. Like I said, The Coldest Night is a relatively simple card game for 1 to 4 players. I have it set up here as if there were maybe 2 players. This will be my hand. This will be the other player's hand. At the beginning of the game, you always start out with these 3 cards on the table. This is your fire pit. Your fire pit can contain at most 4 cards at any given time. If your fire pit is ever empty, there's no cards in it, then you lose the game immediately. These are Frostbite cards. I'll explain a little bit more about them later, but I'll just let you know right now, if you ever run out of Frostbite cards in this pile, you have also lost the game. You win the game by going through this deck of cards, which is called the Kindling cards. So if you go all the way through this deck, there are no more cards in this deck, and there are no more cards in your hand, then you have won the game. So what you do on your turn is basically you start out by having a frostbite removal phase. So if you had any frostbite in front of you, you would see if you can remove any of that. Not relevant on the first turn of the game. Then you're going to do the main phase where you either feed the fire or scavenge. So feeding the fire is what you're going to do most of the time. And basically you're going to be looking at your hand of cards. Each of these cards has 2 numbers at the top, right? They have one in kind of this flame icon here, and they have one in this dark icon, which is supposed to be ash. So you have basically your heat and your ash. So in order to play any of these cards, the total heat of all the cards currently in the fire pit has to be greater than or equal to the ash of the card you want to play. So if I want to play these blinds, put those in the fire, then the total heat of what's in the fire pit has to be 4 or greater, which right now it is. We got 2, 2, and 3 for a total of 7. So I could play these blinds. That would be the 4th card in the fire pit, and that would be my main phase. Then we do the cleanup phase. Cleanup phase starts by having the fire die down. So you take the rightmost card from the fire pit, you get rid of it. That's just discarded, no longer relevant. Then you check for frostbite. So if there are less than 3 cards in the fire pit, you'd get a frostbite card from there. Not the case at this moment. And then you're going to draw another kindling card from the deck. So that's what you would do on your turn. We'll go over to our second player, see what she has and what she could do on her turn. So again, she's going to check for frostbite removal. She doesn't have any frostbite yet, so that's not relevant. Then she's going to either feed the fire or scavenge. So she has some cards here that she could use to feed the fire, but we'll just have her scavenge instead, just to demonstrate how that works. So scavenging, you draw 3 cards from the top of this deck, and you distribute them as you like between players. So we'll just say, we'll keep 2 cards, give 1 card to him. So that's what she does. Then she's going to do her cleanup, so she's going to get rid of that card because it's the rightmost card. And there are now less than 3 cards here, so she's going to get a frostbite card. Frostbite cards have 2 things that are important. They have some kind of negative effect, right? So here your boons do not trigger. I'll explain boons a little bit later. And then you have this value here, okay? So it's a 6 on her. I'll explain what that does in just a minute. Okay, then she's going to draw a kindling card, okay? So now back to me on my turn. So now on my turn, I'm looking at possibly, I got to check for frostbite. Not the case. I don't have any frostbite. So then I'm going to, let's say, feed the fire. So now there are only 2 cards there. There's a combined heat in the fire of 4 right now, 3 and a 1. So I could play anything that has an ash value of 4 or less. That really limits me to just one option, which is this hollow book. And you'll notice again how, so for our second player over here, her frostbite card says your boons do not trigger. So here's what they're talking about. Boons are basically extra positive effects on the bottoms of some of the cards, okay? Some of the cards also have negative effects that happen when you play, okay? So in this case, the boon says if heat total is 7 plus, gain one of these tokens over here. So that is not the case. The heat total after playing that is only 5, so I would not gain one of these tokens, but hopefully you'll play those types of cards at opportunities when you can get these tokens. For example, if I had gotten that token, on the back of that token it says draw 1 card, so I would keep this in front of me. At any point on a future turn I can discard this, getting rid of it for good, and draw a card. So you're doing stuff like that. So I've played 1 card. Because there are less than 4 cards here, while it's still my turn, I can play a 2nd card. Same rules as before. The new card that I play, the ash value has to be equal. Well, it has to be equal or less than the heat out here. So right now the heat is 3, 4, 5. My ash values are 8, 6, and 6, so I cannot play any of these cards. So we'll move on. We're gonna have the fire die down. This is going to slide over. We have less than 3, so now I've got Frostbite as well. And I'm going to draw another card, and then it'll be her turn. So again, she's checking to see if she can remove her Frostbite. What she's looking for is if the total heat in the fire is exactly equal to that value. It can't be higher or lower than that value. So since it isn't exactly equal, she's got to hang on to that Frostbite. Maybe on a later turn, she'll have better luck with that. So you just keep playing that way, going through the deck until you lose the game because the fire goes out, or you get all the Frostbite, or the result I have not seen yet, which is you get all the way through the deck and the cards in your hands and you win. That's basically how the game works. Let's go back up top and I'll give you my thoughts on it. So I was really excited to try the Coldest Night because it hits a lot of things that are interesting to me. One is the theme is really unusual. I've seen other games that have kind of a survival theme to them, but this specific notion of trying to survive a cold night by keeping the fire going, that's pretty unique, so I like that. It's a solo and or cooperative game that's also like a really simple card game. And I like that. I like games like Friday, Onirum. Those are 2 games right off the top of my head that are both basically simple card games that you can play solo or cooperatively. The problem here with the Coldest Night is that I've played it several times now and I've yet to win, which is also not really a problem in and of itself because I like games that are challenging. But the thing about it is there has to be enough there to keep my interest so that I want to keep coming back and attempting it again. And there just really isn't that there. You know, there's a little bit of strategy to the game, but it's all pretty obvious, I think, for the most part. You know, like you're going to play some cards that give you bonuses. You're going to try and play them when those bonuses will take effect or when they'll give you the best advantage. There's some cards that have negative effects, so you're going to try and play those when the negative effect will be mitigated. You know, things like that. So there's like obvious things like that. But apart from that, I feel like the key to winning the game just comes down to some sort of like mathematical, maybe not formula per se, but it's something to do with the math of you have the heat of the fire, you have your cards with their ash values. There's got to be some kind of balance to when do you play cards, you know, how hot do you try to keep the fire? Do you try to burn it like really hot? You know, like as hot as you can all the time, or is there times where you should let it burn down a little bit so you don't use up all your really hot cards on it right away? You know, like there's some kind of balance to that I haven't figured out yet, and the game just doesn't give me enough interesting things to try to make me feel like wanting to come back. So just for comparison's sake, like another really popular cooperative game is Pandemic. And it can be pretty challenging, especially on the more, like on the higher difficulty levels. But I think back to my experience with Pandemic, and it took me a few times to play in that game before I could win. But like, you know, you play it once and you lose, and then you think, okay, well, next time, instead of trying to get rid of all the disease cubes, let's just try and keep the disease cubes like contained while we focus on other things like getting cards in the right people's hands. Okay, so let's try that. So you try that and then you still lose, and then you go, okay, well, last time we built those research stations towards the end and they were really helpful, but we probably should have started building those earlier in the game. So let's try that next time, and then the next time, and then you lose anyway. And then you think, well, next time, let's make better use of our cards because we were so focused on getting all the cards to the right people so they could cure the diseases. But a lot of times we could have used those cards to travel and taking care of this or that or the other. That may have been a better use of those cards. So you start, every time there's something to try that you haven't tried before. And so it keeps you coming back until you develop the skill that you need to beat the game. There's just not that much to it. It's like I like the idea of a simple card game, but it's almost too simple. There's just not enough there to strategize with to make me feel like I want to keep coming back to this game however many times it takes for me to figure out how to beat it. Also, I feel like there's kind of a frustrating thing where you pretty much have to do a certain thing every turn. Like basically every turn you have to be able to play a card. Otherwise, the fire is going to get down to the point where you start taking those frostbite cards. And as soon as you start taking those frostbite cards, that becomes a death spiral. And also as the fire gets fewer cards, the heat of the fire is going to get less, which means the number of different cards you could play, because a lot of the cards have that higher ash value, so you can't play them if the fire gets too low. So it just kind of creates this really frustrating death spiral type of situation where as soon as things start to slide towards the negative, you can get into a point where it's like you really can't dig yourself out of it no matter what you try. So just a couple of things about it that I found the game a little frustrating, and I just found the game kind of boring overall. I like the idea of it. I like the theme. I like that it's a simple card game. You can play solo or cooperative, but just the mechanisms of the game, there's just not enough there to hold my attention and keep me coming back. However long it would take for me to really grok what the strategy is to be able to beat it. So that's my impression of The Coldest Night. Unfortunately, not really a recommendation from me. I wish it could be because, again, I like some things about it. But hopefully that informs you and helps you make a decision about whether or not this is a game for you to pick up or pass. So, again, my name is Nathan. You're watching Nice at Dice. Thank you so much for watching. You enjoy the rest of your day.